Let your thoughts become quiet now, as if the day were slowly folding itself away. Imagine the Earth beneath you, not as a map, not as the familiar arrangement of blue oceans and scattered continents, but as something older, softer, and stranger. A planet breathing through ages too vast for the human mind to hold all at once. A planet where mountains rose and wore down long before the first cities were built, where seas opened and vanished before any name was given to water, where the ground itself moved with a patience deeper than memory. Tonight, we travel gently into that ancient Earth, not with urgency, not with noise, but slowly, as though walking beneath moonlight across a landscape that no living person has ever seen. Long before the pyramids stood beneath the Egyptian sun, long before Mesopotamian rivers carried the first boats of merchants and kings, long before the walls of Babylon or the stones of Stonehenge, the continents were gathered together into one immense landmass. Its name was Pangea. The word means all earth, and there is something beautifully simple about that name. One world, one great body of land. A single, enormous continent surrounded by a global ocean called Panthalassa, whose waters stretched almost endlessly around the shores of this ancient supercontinent. If you could drift above the Earth around 250 million years ago, in some quiet dream of deep time, you would not recognize the planet below. There would be no Atlantic Ocean separating Africa from the Americas, no India nestled against Asia, no Australia sitting alone in the southern seas. Instead, the lands we know today would be joined together like pieces of a forgotten puzzle, pressed into one vast shape. North America would lean against Europe and Africa. South America would fit against the western edge of Africa like a matching curve. Antarctica, India, Australia, and other lands would be connected far to the south, forming broad regions where deserts, forests, rivers, and inland basins stretched beneath ancient skies. This was not a world made for human history. There were no roads, no temples, no villages, no songs carried from one generation to another beside a fire. And yet, in another way, Pangea is part of every human story. Because the stones beneath old cities, the mountains beside ancient trade routes, the cliffs overlooking modern seas, and the fossils buried in quiet places all carry traces of that earlier world. The Earth remembers in layers. It keeps its oldest stories, not in books, but in rock, in coastlines, in the shape of continents, and in the hidden seams beneath our feet. When early sailors crossed the Mediterranean, when caravan routes moved silk and spices across Asia, when indigenous peoples followed rivers and stars across the Americas, they were all living upon fragments of a planet that had once been joined. Their worlds felt ancient to them, as our world feels ancient to us. But beneath their footsteps, deeper than buried pottery, deeper than old bones, deeper than the first tools shaped by human hands, lay the memory of a continent that had already broken apart millions upon millions of years before. Pangea was not the first supercontinent, and it would not be the last. Earth has a long, slow habit of gathering its lands together and then letting them drift away again. Continents move, not like ships across the sea, but like great rafts of stone carried by forces rising from within the planet. They glide so slowly that a human lifetime cannot see the motion. Yet, over millions of years, that motion reshapes everything. A coastline becomes an ocean. A seabed becomes a mountain range. A desert becomes a fossil bed. A living forest becomes a black seam of coal, hidden deep underground. The story of Pangea begins with this quiet truth. The Earth is never still. It only appears still because we are so brief. The floor beneath a sleeping house, the hill beyond a village, the stones in the walls of an old city, all of them are part of a world in motion. Very slowly, very silently, the planet is changing shape. During the age of Pangea, the interior of the supercontinent may have been harsh and dry in many places. Far from the cooling breath of the ocean, Enormous stretches of land could become hot, arid, and difficult for life. Seasonal rains may have swept across some regions, while others remained dusty and sunbaked beneath wide skies. But along rivers, coasts, wetlands, and forested margins, life continued its patient experiments. There were no birds singing in the trees yet, no flowers opening in spring, no mammals as we know them moving through grass. Much of that familiar world still waited in the future. Instead, the landscapes of Pangea belonged to stranger forms of life: early reptiles, amphibians, towering seed ferns, conifers, cycads, and creatures whose bones would one day become clues in the hands of scientists. Some of the earliest ancestors of mammals lived in this world too, small and watchful, moving through shadows long before the rise of the great dinosaurs. They were not grand rulers of the land. They were survivors, quiet presences in a vast prehistoric theatre. And in this, there is something gentle to notice. Life does not always begin in glory. Sometimes it begins small, hidden, and fragile. Sometimes the future rests in creatures almost invisible to the giant world around them. As Pangea stretched across the planet, Earth's climates shifted in broad, slow patterns. Winds moved differently across such a huge landmass. Oceans carried heat in unfamiliar ways. The joining of continents changed habitats, migrations, and the pathways of evolution. A supercontinent is not just a shape on a map. It is a rearrangement of possibility. When lands come together, species meet. When oceans close, climates change. When mountains rise, rain falls in new places and disappears from others. The living world responds, slowly and endlessly, generation after generation, adapting where it can, fading where it cannot, and beginning again in forms no one could have predicted. Tonight, as you rest, it may be comforting to imagine this vastness not as something overwhelming, but as something deeply peaceful. The Earth has changed many times. Worlds have ended, and new worlds have formed. Oceans have opened in darkness. Mountains have lifted into cloud. Forests have vanished and returned in other shapes. Continents have broken apart and drifted away like old companions, taking separate paths beneath the stars. And still, the planet continues. Pangea reminds us that even the ground beneath us has a past filled with movement, loss, reunion, and transformation. It tells us that change can be slow, almost invisible, and yet powerful enough to remake an entire world. So, for now, picture that ancient supercontinent beneath a dim prehistoric sky. A single immense land, resting inside a single immense ocean. No human voices, no cities glowing in the night. Only wind moving over stone, rivers finding their way through unknown valleys, waves touching distant shores, and the quiet pulse of a planet preparing, over ages beyond counting, for everything that would one day come after. Let us continue softly, as though the story of the Earth were being told by candlelight. Pangea was not only a continent, it was a mood of the planet. A long, slow arrangement of stone and sea, shaped by forces hidden far below the surface. Beneath its deserts, forests, rivers, and coasts, the deep interior of Earth was always moving, carrying heat upward from ancient depths, bending and pulling the outer shell of the planet with unimaginable patience. To us, the ground feels certain. It holds our homes, our roads, our temples, our cities, our gardens, and our graves. It feels like the most dependable thing in the world. But to Earth, land is not fixed. It is a traveler. It gathers, separates, collides, sinks, rises, and wanders through deep time. Pangea formed because earlier continents drifted toward one another across vanished oceans. They did not hurry. They moved only a few centimeters each year, sometimes no faster than fingernails grow. But over millions of years, such small motions become world-changing. Coastlines meet, ocean basins close, Ancient seafloors disappear beneath the edges of continents. Mountains rise where land masses press together. Some of the mountains we know today carry echoes of that collision. The Appalachian Mountains in eastern North America, the Caledonian Mountains of Scotland and Scandinavia, and other old ranges were shaped by ancient continental meetings connected to the making of Pangea. Today, they are worn and softened by time, their once towering peaks lowered by rain, ice, wind, and rivers. But in their quiet slopes is a memory of pressure, collision, and creation. A sleeping forest on an Appalachian ridge may feel peaceful now, with mist in the hollows and leaves moving gently in the breeze. Yet those stones once belonged to a drama of continents, when land pressed into land and the crust of earth folded upward like a slow wave. This is one of the gentle wonders of geology. Violence becomes landscape, pressure becomes mountain, time becomes beauty. While Pangea existed, its enormous size shaped the climate in ways very different from the world we know. Modern continents are separated by oceans that soften temperatures and carry moisture inland. But Pangea was vast. Its interior lay far from any sea, and many regions may have been dry, seasonal, and extreme. Imagine a great inland plain, stretching farther than any human empire ever ruled. The air is warm and still. Dust rises in faint golden veils. In the distance, low hills shimmer under the sunlight. Seasonal rains arrive like a blessing, briefly waking rivers and wetlands before the land returns again to dryness. At the edges of this immense continent, where land met ocean, life found softer places. Coastal plains, river deltas, humid forests, and shallow seas held a different rhythm. Here, water shaped the land more tenderly. Here, plants could spread. Here, animals could move, feed, hide, and begin again. Pangea was surrounded by Panthalassa, the great global ocean. Its name means all sea, and it is difficult to imagine its scale. It was not simply an ocean like the Atlantic or the Pacific as we know them today. It was a vast ring of water embracing nearly all the land on Earth. Somewhere within that ocean, waves moved across distances almost beyond thought. Storms rose and faded over waters that touched no human shore. Currents carried heat, minerals, and life through an ocean world whose patterns have long since vanished. Along parts of Pangea's eastern side, another sea existed, the Tethys Ocean. This ancient ocean would play a long and important role in Earth's later story. Its waters once stretched between northern and southern lands, and over time, as continents shifted, the Tethys would shrink, change, and leave behind traces in the regions that would become parts of Europe, North Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Many ages later, long after Pangea had broken apart, human civilizations would rise around lands shaped by the closing of ancient seas. The Mediterranean world, with its harbors, islands, myths, empires, and trade routes, would exist on a stage prepared by movements far older than history. The Greeks sailing the Aegean, the Egyptians watching the Nile, the Phoenicians crossing blue water in cedar ships, the Romans paving roads across stone hills. They lived in landscapes whose deep foundations had been arranged by a planet in motion long before humanity appeared. This is one of the quiet pleasures of thinking about Pangea at night. It connects the familiar to the unimaginable. A ruined city, a mountain path, a coastline glowing at sunset, a fossil in a museum drawer, a desert wind moving over red stone. All of these belong to the same long story. Nothing is separate. Everything rests upon what came before. During the time of Pangea, life was already old. The Earth had known oceans for billions of years. It had known simple life, then more complex life, then forests and reefs and animals moving across land. But the world of Pangea was still far from the world we recognize. There were no grasses spreading across open plains, no butterflies drifting over flowers, no whales in the oceans, no humans sitting beside fire, looking up at the night sky and wondering where they came from. Yet the roots of our world were there. Ancient plants helped shape soils and climates. Reptiles diversified across the connected land. Early mammal relatives lived quietly in the background of a world that seemed to belong to others. Evolution worked slowly, without audience, without plan, without hurry. A small creature moving beneath the cover of ancient vegetation could never know that hundreds of millions of years later, distant descendants of life's long experiment would study its fossilized bones and try to understand the world it inhabited. And perhaps that is what makes deep time so calming. It reminds us that not every process needs to be seen to matter. Not every transformation announces itself. Some of the most important changes happen quietly, in hidden places, over spans too long to measure by ordinary feeling. Pangea did not appear in a single moment. It assembled gradually. It changed while it existed. And eventually, it began to break apart. But before we reach that part of the story, let us simply rest for a moment with the image of this ancient world whole and still beneath the stars. One continent, one great ocean, mountains rising in silence, rivers wandering through unnamed valleys, forests breathing in unfamiliar air, small creatures moving softly through the undergrowth, and above it all, the same moon, not quite as it appears to us now, but already faithful in the night sky, pulling gently on ancient seas, shining over a world that had not yet dreamed of us. Let us drift a little deeper now, into the living world of Pangea. Not quickly, only as slowly as a leaf settling on still water. The supercontinent was immense, and across its broad surface, life did not appear in one single pattern. It changed from region to region, from coast to interior, from wetland to dry basin, from forested lowland to open, sunlit plain. The world was joined, but it was not simple. Even one continent could contain many moods. There were places where the air may have been dry and warm, where the land stretched under a pale sky and seasonal winds moved over dust, stone, and scattered vegetation. There were places where river systems gathered life along their banks, making narrow ribbons of green through otherwise harsh country. There were coastal lands where moist air softened the world, and plants grew more densely beneath the ancient sun. In these landscapes, no human footstep had ever touched the ground. There were no campfires at dusk, no carved tools left beside a stream, no children listening to elders tell stories beneath the stars. Humanity was still hidden far in the future, waiting inside a chain of life that had not yet unfolded. And yet, the earth was already full of presence. Pangea belonged to creatures both strange and quietly familiar in their needs. They moved in search of food, shelter, water, warmth, and safety. They rested in shadow. They crossed mudflats. They left footprints in soft ground that, in rare and fortunate places, would harden, survive, and become messages from an unreachable age. Some animals of Pangea were ancestors or relatives of later reptiles and mammals. Others belonged to lines that would vanish entirely, leaving only bones, teeth, tracks, and impressions behind. There were amphibians lingering near water, reptiles spreading into drier habitats, and mammal-like creatures known as synapsids, some of which had already begun to show features that would one day become important in the long story leading toward mammals. Among them were the therapsids, an extraordinary group of animals that lived before and during the age when dinosaurs began to rise. Some were large and powerful. Others were smaller, quieter, more adapted to hidden ways of life. They were not mammals yet, but they carried hints of what would eventually come. Changes in posture, teeth, metabolism, and perhaps behavior. It is gentle to imagine them not as monsters, but as living beings within their own complete world. A small synapsid might move through the shade of ancient vegetation, pausing at the scent of another animal. It might listen, breathe, and continue. Around it, insects stir. A river glints in the distance. The ground is warm, the sky is wide. No human name exists for any of this, and still, life continues with perfect seriousness. Plants too gave Pangea its quiet texture. There were no flowering meadows as we know them today. Flowers had not yet transformed the colors of the land, but ancient forests and plant communities were rich in other ways. Conifers rose in some regions. Cycads and seed ferns spread their fronds beneath the light. Horsetails and other ancient lineages grew in damp places, linking the world of Pangea to even older green worlds before it. To walk there in imagination would be to enter a forest without birdsong, without the scent of blossoms, without the familiar hum of bees in summer. The silence would not be empty. It would simply belong to another earth. A breeze might pass through fronds and needles. The air might carry resin, damp soil, and the mineral scent of water over stone. In the distance, an animal calls, then stops. The forest settles again. One of the most fascinating truths about Pangea is that its connected land allowed life to spread across enormous distances. On our modern planet, oceans often separate species and shape them into different paths. But on Pangea, many land animals could, over generations, move far across the supercontinent. This helped explain why fossils of related ancient creatures are found today on continents now separated by wide oceans. Long before scientists fully understood plate tectonics, fossils offered quiet clues. Similar fossil plants and animals appeared in South America, Africa, India, Antarctica, and Australia. These discoveries suggested that these lands had once been connected. The continents, it seemed, had not always been where they are now. A fossil is a small thing compared to a continent. A leaf pressed into stone, a jawbone, a footprint, a fragment. Yet such small remains can change the shape of human understanding. They can tell us that the map of the world is temporary. They can whisper that oceans are young, that mountains are passing forms, that the land beneath us has traveled. In the early 20th century, the idea that continents had drifted was still controversial. Alfred Wegener, a German scientist, proposed that the continents had once been joined and later moved apart. He noticed, among other things, how coastlines seemed to fit together and how similar fossils and rock formations appeared across lands now widely separated. At first, many scientists resisted the idea. The Earth, to them, seemed too solid for continents to wander. There was not yet a clear explanation for how such movement could happen, and so the theory waited, quietly, like many truths do, until more evidence could gather around it. Later, the study of the ocean floor, earthquakes, magnetism, and seafloor spreading helped reveal the deeper mechanism. Plate tectonics transformed geology. The continents were not floating aimlessly, but riding on vast plates of Earth's lithosphere, shaped by forces from within the planet. And suddenly, Pangea was not just an idea. It became part of a much larger understanding. Earth as a dynamic world, continuously remaking itself. This knowledge does not need to feel cold or technical. It can feel intimate, because it means the ground beneath every old town, every farm, every temple, every road, and every sleeping person is part of a great, slow journey. A stone in Scotland may be related to a stone in North America. A fossil in Brazil may speak to a fossil in Africa. A mountain chain may be the scar of an ancient collision. A quiet valley may sit where an ocean once opened or closed. The world is full of hidden reunions. Even separation leaves evidence of belonging. As the long age of Pangea continued, life adapted to its vast environments. Some creatures thrived in dry conditions. Others remained bound to rivers and wetlands. Some lineages spread widely across the connected land. Others became local, delicate, and vulnerable. The story was never still. But then, near the boundary between the Permian and Triassic periods, Earth passed through one of the most difficult transitions in its history. a great extinction changed life profoundly. Many species disappeared. Ecosystems were broken and rearranged. The world that emerged afterward was different. We do not need to dwell on the darkness of it tonight. It is enough to know that Earth has known loss, and Earth has known renewal. After great disruption, life returned in new forms, slowly, unevenly, patiently. The Triassic world began to open. Early dinosaurs appeared, at first not as giants, but as relatively modest animals in a recovering planet. Other reptiles diversified. Mammal relatives continued in quieter ways. Life, as it so often does, found small openings and entered them. And through all of this, Pangea remained the great stage, a single continent beneath ancient skies, a land of heat, rivers, forests, deserts, coastlines, and long migrations. A world where the future was already being prepared, though no creature could know it. So tonight, as the mind grows softer, imagine the ancient surface of Pangea at dusk. The air is cooling. A river moves slowly through a wide basin. Strange trees stand against a fading sky. Small animals settle into shelter. Somewhere, footprints fill with silt. Somewhere, leaves fall into mud. Somewhere, a bone is buried gently by floodwater. Millions of years later, these traces will become clues. But for now, they are simply part of evening. The ancient world breathes. The stars appear one by one, and the long memory of Earth continues, quietly, beneath them. Let us continue now into the slow separation of Pangea. Not as a sudden breaking, not as a violent scene, but as something much quieter and more patient, a change so gradual that no creature standing on the land could have noticed it happening. The supercontinent had formed through the gathering of older lands. But what gathers on Earth does not remain forever. Deep beneath the crust, heat moves. Rock flows slowly over immense spans of time. The planet's inner warmth rises and shifts, creating pressure, weakness, and motion in the outer shell. And so, after millions of years of being joined, Pangea began to open. At first, the signs would have been hidden. A stretching of the crust, long cracks forming across the land, valleys sinking between high edges of stone, volcanoes appearing in places where the Earth's surface was being pulled apart. A rift is a kind of beginning. It is a wound in the land, but also an invitation to the sea. Where the crust stretches and thins, low places can form. Rivers may enter them, lakes may gather, lava may rise. Over long ages, the land continues to pull away on either side. And eventually, if the rifting continues, ocean water enters, filling the new space with blue depth. This is how a continent can become two continents. This is how a valley can become a sea. This is how an ocean can be born. The Atlantic Ocean did not always exist. It was not an eternal feature of Earth. It began as a separation, a widening space between lands that had once touched. What is now? North America slowly drifted away from what is now Africa and Europe. What is now South America moved away from Africa. The matching shapes of their coastlines are still one of the quiet visual clues of their old union. To look at a map is to see absence. To look more deeply is to see memory. The Atlantic, with all its later histories, ships, storms, migrations, trade winds, empires, songs, crossings, and sorrows, rests inside a much older geological story. Long before human beings named its waters, long before sailors watched stars above its waves, it was only a growing rift, a young ocean opening between ancient shores. In time, the breaking of Pangea helped shape the world that human history would inherit. Separate continents created separate climates. Oceans changed their currents. New coastlines formed. Mountain ranges rose in some places and eroded in others. species became divided by water and distance, and evolution began to write different stories on different lands. Isolation is one of nature's quiet artists. When a population becomes separated from others, it may slowly change. New environments ask new questions of life. Over generations, bodies, behaviors, and patterns shift. This is how continents become worlds of their own. Australia would one day carry its own remarkable living heritage. South America would become home to forests and animals shaped by long isolation and later reconnection. Africa would hold landscapes where the deep human story would eventually unfold. Antarctica, once connected to warmer worlds, would drift toward a colder destiny beneath ice. But at the time Pangea was breaking, none of these futures had arrived. There was only motion. Slow, immense, silent motion. The breakup unfolded across the Mesozoic era, the great age that would come to be known for dinosaurs. As the land divided, the dinosaurs themselves spread, diversified, and filled many environments. Some walked across plains. Some lived near rivers and forests. Some would become enormous. Others would remain small, quick, and delicate. Above them, the skies changed too. Flying reptiles moved through the air. Later, birds would begin their own story from feathered dinosaur ancestors. In the oceans, marine reptiles traveled through seas that had formed and shifted with the continents. The world was becoming more recognizable in fragments, but still beautifully alien. No grasslands yet in the way we know them. No human eyes. No cities. No written calendars. Only life moving through changing habitats on a planet still rearranging its face. It is peaceful, in a strange way, to imagine this breakup without sadness. Pangea did not fail by separating. It became the beginning of many worlds. Its division allowed new oceans, new climates, new coastlines, new evolutionary paths. The breaking apart of one ancient land made space for the diversity of the later Earth. There are moments in nature when separation is not an ending, but a widening, a giving of room, a quiet permission for difference. Much later, human civilizations would rise on these separated continents, each shaped by the lands and waters around them. The Nile Valley, the Indus Plain, the Yellow River, the Andes, the Mediterranean, the Mississippi Basin, the islands of the Pacific, the old routes across Central Asia. All of them would belong to a world created by drifting plates and deep geological inheritance. Human history often feels vast when we stand inside it. The rise and fall of kingdoms, the building of cities, the carving of roads through mountains, the passing of languages from parent to child, the ruins left behind in deserts and forests. But beside Pangea, human history is a whisper in a cathedral. The oldest empires are recent. The first farms are recent. The first cave paintings are recent. Even the earliest human ancestors are young compared with the age of continents. And yet, this does not make human life small in an empty way. It makes it tender. It reminds us that every human story has unfolded on a moving earth. Every home was built on traveling stone. Every ancient road crossed land with a memory older than the stars of human myth. Every harbor opened onto seas that were once impossible, until the planet made room for them. Pangea's breakup also reminds us that the world we know is temporary. The continents are still moving now. The Atlantic is still widening. The Pacific is changing. Africa continues its slow journey northward. The Himalayas still rise as India presses into Asia. East Africa is rifting, and in some far future, a new ocean may form there. The map is not finished. It has never been finished. We are simply living during one beautiful page of its long, turning book. When you look at the world today, at the blue curve of coastlines and the shapes of continents, you are seeing a moment in a much longer dance. North America here, Africa there. Australia alone in the south, Antarctica under ice, Europe and Asia joined in their wide complexity, South America tapering toward cold southern seas. All of it appears stable. All of it is moving. Tonight, let that thought be restful rather than restless. The Earth does not hurry. It does not demand that we understand everything at once. It changes in rhythms, older than breathing, older than language, older than dreams. Pangea came together. Pangea held. Pangea opened. And from its opening came oceans, landscapes, climates, migrations, and futures. Imagine now, one of those early rift valleys under a quiet evening sky. The land is warm from the day. Dark volcanic stone lies in long ridges. A lake reflects the first stars. Somewhere below, the crust is thinning. Somewhere far away, another piece of the continent is beginning an almost invisible journey. There is no sound of breaking. Only insects in the dusk, wind over stone, water resting in the low places, and the deep, patient turning of earth. Let us come now to the final part of our quiet journey. Not to an ending exactly, because the earth has no true ending in the way a storybook does. It turns, changes, gathers, releases, and begins again. But for tonight, we can let our thoughts settle gently on what Pangea left behind. The supercontinent is gone now. No traveler can cross it. No river still runs from one side of its endless interior to the other. No ancient animal moves beneath its forests. No shore of Panthalassa waits untouched beneath the prehistoric sun. The land that was once Pangea has become many lands, scattered across the globe like pages from an old book carried by wind. And yet, Pangea is not truly lost. It remains in the fit of continents. It remains in matching rocks found across oceans. It remains in fossils shared by places now separated by wide seas. It remains in mountain belts worn low by time, in ancient coal beds, in the hidden history of ocean floors, and in the slow motion of the plates beneath us. The earth remembers through evidence. A fossil leaf in India, a reptile skeleton in South Africa, a rock layer in North America, a mountain in Scotland, a coastline in Brazil, a desert basin in Morocco. Each one is a quiet fragment of a world that was once whole. For a long time, people could only wonder at these clues. They saw that South America and Africa seemed to fit together like two pieces of a broken bowl. They found similar fossils on distant continents. They noticed rock formations that seemed to continue across oceans. But the explanation was not obvious at first. The idea that continents could move felt almost impossible. The ground seemed too solid. The world seemed too fixed. But science often begins with a gentle disturbance of certainty. A small question appears. A pattern refuses to disappear. A strange match asks to be understood. And over time, patient observation changes the shape of knowledge. The story of Pangea is also the story of how human beings learn to see the earth differently. Not as a static stage upon which history happens, but as a living system of stone, heat, water, air, and time. A planet whose surface is always being made and unmade. This understanding is young compared with the Earth itself. Plate tectonics became widely accepted only in the 20th century, after evidence from ocean floors, magnetic stripes, earthquakes, and seafloor spreading revealed how the planet's plates move. What once sounded strange became the foundation of modern geology. And now, because of that knowledge, we can look at the familiar world with a deeper calm. A beach is not only a beach. It may be the edge of a continent slowly traveling. A mountain is not only a mountain. It may be the lifted memory of collision. A fossil is not only an old bone. It may be a message from a vanished landscape. An ocean is not only water. It may be the widening space where two lands once separated. Even the quiet ground beneath a sleeping room is part of this long movement. Tonight, while the world outside grows still, the plates continue their slow paths. They do not pause because we are unaware. They move beneath cities and deserts, beneath forests and old ruins, beneath farms, rivers, temples, roads, and sleeping neighborhoods. They move beneath the places where ancient civilizations once rose and faded, beneath the stones of Egypt, where builders aligned monuments with sun and stars, beneath Mesopotamia, where rivers carried early writing, grain, and memory, beneath the Indus Valley, where cities once stood with carefully planned streets, beneath the lands of the Maya, the Andes, the Mediterranean, China, Africa, Europe, and the Pacific Islands. Human cultures, with all their songs, languages, journeys, and dreams, have unfolded on a planet far older and more patient than any empire. There is something humbling in this, but also something comforting, because deep time does not erase human life. It holds it. It gives it a place inside a much greater continuity. The same earth that carried Pangea also carried the first forests, the first animals on land, the age of dinosaurs, the rise of mammals, the first humans, the first fires, the first stories, and finally, this quiet moment tonight. You, resting now, are also part of Earth's long story, not separate from it, not outside it, made from elements shaped in ancient stars, living on a planet shaped by ancient seas, resting on land that has traveled through deep time. Pangea teaches us that home is not a fixed point. Home is movement remembered slowly. Home is the place where the earth has carried us for a little while, beneath one arrangement of continents, beneath one pattern of oceans, beneath one night sky. And far in the future, the map will change again. Some scientists imagine that another supercontinent may form hundreds of millions of years from now. It may not look like Pangea. It may gather in a different place, with different oceans closing and different mountains rising. The continents we know may meet again in a new arrangement, under skies no human civilization can picture. This is not something to fear tonight. It is simply the long breathing of the planet, gathering, separating, gathering again, like tides, but made of stone and time. As you drift toward rest, imagine the continents moving so slowly that even the stars seem hurried beside them. Imagine Africa leaning northward, the Atlantic widening, the Pacific shifting, mountains rising grain by grain, oceans opening drop by drop, the earth never still, yet never rushed. And beneath all of it, the memory of Pangea remains. The memory of one immense land beneath an ancient sky. The memory of deserts, rivers, forests, strange animals, silent coastlines, and the first hints of futures not yet born. The memory of a planet that has changed many times and still continues with quiet grace. So let the story soften now. Let the maps fade. Let the names of oceans and continents dissolve into something simpler. Land, sea, stone, time, a world once whole, a world gently divided, a world still moving. And here, in the calm of night, you may rest inside that vastness. The same earth that carried Pangea carries you now, gently, silently, through the dark. While continents drift, oceans breathe, and deep time keeps its peaceful watch.